everybody, I'm Pia from Stitches and Scraps, and today I want to show you how to knit the Ease On Down the Rows blanket square. I finished 4 rows of garter stitch from my border. Now I'm ready to do the next row, which is the setup row for the pattern. It's very important to get the stitch counts right on this row, otherwise you'll get to the end of the pattern and it will not work. So go through this row really slowly and carefully. First, we're going to start like we always do by slipping the first stitch knitwise and knitting 3 more stitches for our garter stitch edge. Okay, now I'm going to start doing decreases and yarn overs. And the reason for this, what I'm kind of doing is the decreases are binding off a couple of stitches for me, and the yarn over is adding a stitch that starts on this row. So later on, when I get up to the top of the pattern and I drop that stitch all the way down, it stops here. It stops at this row. It doesn't go any further because that stitch only started with this row. So that's why the stitch counts are very important. So first we're going to knit 1, and then we're going to start with the decreases. We start with a knit 2 together. Now here's the yarn over, so this is going to be the first column of stitches that gets dropped. This is the bottom of that column. And then we're going to do a slip slip knit to get a decrease that leans the other way. And then in between that, we're going to have 2 regular stitches, 2 knit stitches. Okay, and then another set of decreases and yarn overs. So knit 2 together, yarn over, and slip slip knit. Now again, in between, we're going to have 2 regular knit stitches. And yes, these decreases are going to make your whole project cinch in like this. Don't worry, later when we drop the stitch, it will widen out again. And that's actually why we're doing the decreases too, is to make room for those drop stitches later. So I've done my 2 knit stitches. Now I do my last set of decreases. So it's knit 2 together, yarn over, and slip slip knit. There we go. And then there's 1 more stitch, because remember we started with 1 stitch at the other end. And now I've got my 4 stitch border. So I knit 3 and I purl 1. And that's it for the setup row. So now all we're going to do for the whole rest of the pattern until we get to the top of it is we're just going to knit. So we're going to knit until we're about a 1/2 inch from the 6 inches. So until we're about 5.5 inches, because then we'll do the garter stitch border on top and that'll give us that extra 1/2 inch. So I'm going to do a whole bunch more rows in garter stitch and then I'll come back and show you the last row before the border. I finished 39 more rows after the eyelet row, so that means I have a total of 40 rows from the border, which is perfect. Ideally, I want this to be a multiple of 4. If you mess up the count and it's not quite a multiple of 4, don't worry, we can fudge it later. It's not going to hurt anything, and I'll show you how to make those adjustments when we get there. But ideally, you want a multiple of 4 rows from the border. So now let's do the row where we get to drop stitches. This is the fun one. And again, your stitch counts are going to be really important here. So let's go slowly on this row. So we're going to slip 1 and knit 3 for our garter stitch border. Now, our goal is going to be to recreate the row we had before we put in those eyelets. So when we made the eyelet row, we knit 1 first, and then we put in a decrease. So now instead of a decrease, we need to put in an increase. And I'm going to do that with a knit front and back. So I knit through the front loop and I knit through the back loop. Okay, so that took away that decrease. Now this, if I'm not mistaken, should be directly above where we put in the yarn over. So let's take a look and make sure before we drop the stitch that we are actually dropping the correct stitch. So this is, let me get this here. this is the stitch I want to drop. If I go straight down this row of purl bumps, straight down, I end up right on top of an eyelet. So that's perfect. That is definitely the stitch I want to drop. So now I'm just going to drop it. We had added this yarn over. Now we're going to take it away. Just let the stitch drop. I know it's scary, just let it drop. And then after the yarn over, we had another decrease. So we're going to put in another increase of a knit front and back. And then in between, we had 2 regular stitches, so we do 2 regular stitches. And then we had another decrease, so this becomes an increase, knit front and back. Whoops. There we go. And then this should be above a yarn over again. So let's look, let's make sure. You want to make sure every time. You don't want to drop a stitch that's not above a yarn over, otherwise you'll have a problem. So let's follow this all the way down, straight line down, go from bump to bump, and we end up directly on top of a yarn over. Perfect, that's exactly what we want. So we drop that stitch. And then we've got another decrease, so we're going to make an increase here. And then we had 2 regular stitches, another decrease, which is now going to become an increase. And we should have our last yarn over, so let's check it. Down the column, down the column, down the column, and directly on top of an eyelet. So perfect. That was our last one. So we dropped that one. And then on the other side of that one we had a decrease, so we're going to put in an increase. And then we had 1 more normal stitch, and then our 4-stitch border. So that's just knit 3 and purl 1. So now we're back to the stitches that we started with, and I'm going to go ahead and do the 4 rows of garter stitch to finish off the top border, fasten that off, and then we'll come back and drop our stitches down and I'll show you how that looks. I finished my border, I fastened off, so now my needles are out of the way. I also marked that stitch where we put the increases back in. This is actually right next to where I dropped the yarn over, so that I know that this row is not part of the ladder that I'm going to be forming, and I can follow that across to find the top of the others, just because sometimes the tension will get a little bit wonky and you won't be 100% sure. So now you can see this stitch has already started dropping down. All I'm going to do is I'm going to keep letting it drop. I know it's scary, but I promise it will stop where we put that yarn over. So I'm going to tug on each one of these a little bit to kind of put some tension into the stitches next to them, and make sure I got a nice horizontal bar to work with. And I just keep going all the way down, and then when it hits the yarn over, it magically stops. And now if I count this, I should have 40 little horizontal bars going all the way down this ladder. So there is my first ladder. Now I'm going to do that for all 3 of these. And there we go. Now we have 3 ladders to work with. So now we're going to start an embroidery technique to kind of add some design to these ladders. I've threaded a fairly long piece of yarn onto my tapestry needle. You want at least maybe 24 inches, but whatever you can handle comfortably. And I've worked it in like I'm weaving in with the tail. I've woven in the tail right here, and I've brought the yarn up on the side, on the left side of this first ladder, just before or just underneath the first horizontal bar. So right next to that stitch I had marked, okay? And you can start from the other side too, it doesn't matter, but I brought it up on one side and just to the side of this first bar. And I'm turning my work sideways so that I can work across this ladder this way, okay? So now I'm going to take my needle, and this is where you want to count your rungs. If you have a multiple of 4 of these little horizontal lines, then you're fine to do it exactly the way I'm saying. If you have an extra 1 or 2, add that extra 1 or 2 to the first bundle that we make or the last bundle that we make. If you have an extra 2, add 1 to the first and 1 to the last one. You'll see what I mean as we go. But if you have a multiple of 4, then follow this. Wrap your needle around or put it under the first 2 bars. Okay? If you need to make up an extra bar, you can do 3 bars. But otherwise, put it under the first 2 bars and pull it out the other side. And then go under those same 2 bars again. So this is going to wrap around those 2 bars. Go under the same 2 bars again and come up next to them below where the ladder is. So in this stitch that's actually a stitch, come up just past those bars that you just wrapped. So between these 2 bars and the next bar. And what you've done is you've made a little bundle out of these first 2 bars. Okay, and I'm going to zoom in so you can see that a little bit closer. There, do you see that little bundle out of the first 2 bars here? Okay, now that's just for the edge. As we go down, we're going to do 4s. Okay, so we're going to make a bundle out of the next 4 bars, just like this. Go under 4 bars and pull it out. And then go under those same 4 bars again and come up in the stitch just next to them between those 4 bars and the next bar. What we're doing here is an embroidery technique that's called drawn thread embroidery. And what that means, if you think of embroidery fabric, it's got threads going horizontally and threads going vertically, right? Well, in drawn thread embroidery, what you do is you purposefully pull out some of those threads so you create a ladder like this. And then you use your embroidery thread to kind of weave around the rungs of the ladder just like we're doing. This particular stitch that we're doing here is called hem stitch in drawn thread embroidery. My mom taught me drawn thread embroidery when I was very, very young, but I haven't actually done it since I was about 7 years old, so I don't remember a lot of it. But this is one of the stitches I do remember is this hem stitch. It's a pretty basic stitch in that type of embroidery. So again, we're just making little bundles of 4, and this is why you wanted a multiple of 4. So we go around the 4 once, and then around again and come up underneath to tack it down. And you want to watch your tension. You don't want to be pulling the bundles next to each other or anything like that. Don't want to tug on them too much. You just want a nice snug wrap to hold them together. Now when I get to the end here, I should have just as many bars left as what I started with. So in my case, I started with 2, and I have 2 left, which is perfect. If you started with 3, you should have 3 left. If you have 3 in one and you have 2 in the other, that's okay too. Don't worry if it's off just a little bit, but you don't want like 5 in one bundle and 2 in the other one. You want them pretty even. Okay, so that has given me all my bundles down this side of this ladder. Now I'm going to take this yarn and I'm going to weave it through, going across to the other side. And I'm actually going to try and do a little bit of duplicate stitching here, sort of, and follow the curve of this purl stitch so that I'm hiding my thread as I go, and kind of weave it through like this. Not doing this very successfully, I know. Duplicate stitch is not one of my strengths. But we come out. Basically, you just want to hide the yarn a little bit underneath there, okay? And we want to come out on the side of these 2 threads, just like when we started here. We started right next to them. We want to start right next to them here, because now we're going to turn our work the other way, and we're going to work bundles this way. But this time we're going to stagger them off of what we did last time. So last time we started with 2. This time we're going to take those 2, or 3, or however many you have in the first bundle. Okay, so take your entire first bundle and take 2 threads from the second bundle. So we're splitting that second bundle in half, and do your hem stitch just like we did before. Okay, and now we've got 2 threads left from the second bundle, so we're going to take those 2 and 2 more from the third bundle. So as you can see, we're kind of taking half of each bundle and combining it with half of the next bundle. And that's going to give us that zigzag appearance. So now the last 2 threads from this bundle and the first 2 threads from this bundle. And 2 and 2. And then when I get to the end, I have the last 2 stitches from this bundle, the last 2 horizontal bars, and whatever is left in my last bundle. If I use 2, which I did in mine, then I pick up 2. If you have 3 in yours, go ahead and pick up 3. And there we go. That column is done. And you can see we've got this nice little zigzag kind of almost trellis looking thing going. And again, we can take, if you still have enough yarn, you can take it and work it nicely through these stitches, come out over here and start working down this row. And when you get all 3 of the rows done, then you'll be done with the square. So there we go. I finished the embroidery. You can see the zigzags back and forth, and that will open up and even out even a little bit more when I block it. But that is how you make the ease on down the rows blanket square. If you like this video, be sure to give me a thumbs up, share it with your friends, or leave me a comment on the video. You can also subscribe to my channel for more great patterns and tutorials. Thanks for watching.